spearheaded the effort for the marquee restoration.
So we bought the building, remodeled it. Looks nothing like it used to.
The ugliest Christmas sweater I've ever seen.
Me too.
And I got to say, this is the first time in my podcast that we've done something more virtual and more remote, and it has to do with all this crazy weather. It's mid-March, and I put out a post earlier that said Monday, mid-March, and I forgot what the other M was. Maybe it was Monday. It must have been Monday or something like that. But I'm bringing on Danielle onto the show. Danielle, thank you for coming on. You are a nurse right now, I believe. You like kind of do all kinds of stuff, right? I mean, you're more or less scheduling and like the mama of all the nurses, correct?
Yeah, I do all sorts of things. I have a really great job as a nurse, but lately I've been doing a lot of writing and advocating and being an activist for sexual violence. So
your story starts November 18th, 2018. You're a sexual assault survivor, and that's why we're having you on the show. We want to make sure that we're promoting everything that we need to. Even in the darkest day of your life, you are doing so much for not only yourself, but for other people. So we're going to hear Danielle's story. We are going to talk about her life and kind of the things that you're up to. And I mean, for a day like that, it's beyond one day. I mean, it's affected your life now, and it will for the rest of your time on this earth. You're doing a lot. So we're going to talk about that in a second. I want to give a shout out to Alpha Roofing Company. They are in North Iowa. They're all over Iowa. They're our sponsor for the Mavericks podcast. And for the most part, they have, I would say, North Iowa under control, but they're down in Cedar Rapids after the derecho, and they're in Des Moines as well, and Mason City. So props to them. Danielle, I want to start out with the story a little bit about kind of what you did this weekend, because I kind of think this comes full circle as well. You were in the mountains, but you were not necessarily spending all your time there skiing, correct?
Correct. I was not.
What were you working on?
My aunt and uncle have a house out in the mountains, so I flew out there with them. And while they went skiing, I stayed back at their house and was working on my book. It's called 4 Pounds of Pressure, and I'm still working on the subtitle, but I have a friend named Lee that's helping me come up with a subtitle. So I spent a lot of time working on that, the whole plane ride there, time while we were there, and then the whole plane ride back, I spent editing my book, changing things, getting permission to use people's names, all sorts of things that I was working on. So I think it's almost ready to send to the editor. I plan to use Brooke Warner, and I might be able to send it to her as early as this weekend. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Which is nuts, because the last time I talked to you, I can't remember how far you were, but then you said before we came on, you're like, I might be able to send this to the editor by the weekend. I'm like, did you sleep at all when you were on vacation? Like when I said to you, when I go on vacation, I try to relieve myself and try to come back, just a different person and back to where I should be. And you are, you're working. You were writing the whole time.
Right. I work outside of work, but that's what makes me happy. So they were skiing and, out and about, and I stayed back and I did a lot of writing, and it made me happy. And that's rewarding for me, because I know that my book is going to be somebody else's survival guide someday. So I just really look forward to that. So
yeah, let's talk about let's talk about the book, because obviously this goes back to what happened back in 2018. Tell everyone that's watching and anyone that will be watching this what the book is about. From front to the back.
Sure. It's hard to find a place to start. So in November of 2018, I was separated from my husband, and he was working on the road. He'd be gone for 3 weeks at a time, and he would come back for just a week, spend time with his son. But he had his own apartment that he would stay in. And on November 17th, I had my son. my aunt had asked us if we wanted to go ice skating that night, and we said no because we were going to decorate our Christmas tree that day. So we went to a movie in the theater. We bought Christmas lights. We had a really great day, and I tucked him into bed. I checked all my doors. I made sure everything was locked. I think the hardest part was knowing that I had such a great day and it was such a happy day, and somebody was waiting to hurt me. So that night I had one glass of wine. I went to bed at like 9:30. And then I woke up at 1:27 in the morning, and I had my phone. I clicked on the side button and shined it at the end of my bed. And that's when a man stood up and held a gun at my head, and told me not to move. I was zip tied shortly after, just a couple seconds. He had me on my stomach. He zip tied my wrist behind my back. And then he just kind of stood there, and I could hear him breathing like he was accomplished, like success, like I did it, like I got what I wanted. And then
what was going through your head, just to stop you, because I know there's a lot of emotions and there's a lot going on, because I mean, it's about as close as you're probably going to get to death until you do die, hopefully. I mean, at some point. So, I mean, what was going through your head at that moment? I mean, probably racing, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, at first I thought it was a joke. I'm like, what is happening? This isn't funny. And then, that was like a half of a second. And then the rest of the time I was instantly sweating. My heart was racing, and I just thought I was going to either be taken or die. And then, the more time that he spent there, the less likely I thought he was going to take me. But he did grab a water glass on my nightstand, and he said, "What's in here?" And I told him it was water. And he told me that he needed to give me something so he could get out of my house. So I knew that he wanted to drug me. I imagine he wanted to drug me, then rape me. But I told him that I couldn't be drugged because I needed to take care of my son. And then I was so mad at myself because I don't know if he knew I had a child in the house, but at that point he did. And that it broke my heart. It broke my heart, like admitting that I had my child there. Because I don't know if he knew I had my son there at all. But at that point he did. So
do you think, I think in those situations, we're programmed as humans, consciously and subconsciously, to do anything it takes to save our lives. Do you think maybe you saying this to the person that we know now as Zane, that may have saved your life and ultimately maybe your son Wyatt's life too?
I mean, yeah, I think
big picture, I think of.
Yeah, I think a lot of the things that I said and did throughout the 5 hours that he was there was to save my son's life, and then mine. Mine came second. But of course, now I'm the one that told him that he was there. I'm sure he knew that Wyatt was there because Zane knows I have a child. But I didn't know that at the time, so I thought I gave it all away. But anyways, he stood by the side of my bed for a long time. He ended up crawling on top of me. He was grinding up against me, and the zip ties were so tight on my wrists that I couldn't, my fingers were numb, they were hurting, my wrists were hurting, and he knew that. So he actually asked me where some scissors were. And so he went to my bathroom and got scissors and actually cut the zip ties off. And that's when that he raped me twice at that time. Yeah.
Well, I think of this too. I mean, most sexual assault victims, they know the person that did it, and you knew Zane, didn't you? Unfortunately. Unfortunately,
I didn't know it was him at the time. He was wearing a camouflage mask. He had layers of clothes on. He had gloves on. I remember it was a 9mm two-tone gun. I remember the silver on it. I remember the black on it. I remember exactly what it looked like when it was pointed at my head. He spent a lot of time not in my room, though. So when he was done raping me twice, he was up and down. He was almost remorseful. Then he was sorry. Then he was angry. He at one point thought I knew who he was. So I kept telling him, no, I don't know who you are. And I didn't. He was disguising his voice. And it was almost
How was he disguising his voice, Danielle?
Yeah, it was almost like he had something to disguise his voice because he was so good at it. He did not slip once. And it was like there was some sort of device that he was using because it was just like a deep, gruff voice. And I didn't recognize it at all.
And another key piece that I'm hearing about that I didn't hear when you went on with KRLC, and maybe I've watched that interview and I've gotten to know you a little bit. Do you think there was some remorse afterward, or even some remorse during, once he knew and I don't want to say it in a negative way, but it almost seemed like you were his trophy. So you said that immediately. So once he got you, do you think there was some remorse, like he was sorry?
Oh, absolutely. So he was at the side of my bed and he had his arms up like this, like he was sitting at a bar, like waiting to be served. And he said, if it's any consolation, it felt so effing good. And then he said, and then I tried to like rationalize with him. I tried to make him realize that I was a person. So I was, talking about living with my son, and I wanted to see him, grow up and play basketball. And he said, don't tell me you're getting Stockholm syndrome. And I said, I don't know what that is. And then he explained it. And so I was trying to connect with him. And then he would just get angry again. And he was just so up and down. But then, a lot of time after that, he spent outside of my room. He came back in my room. I don't know.
What was he doing? Do you know what he was doing?
Well, now I know he was stealing electronics.
So there was more to this beyond raping you for basically 5 hours. He was stealing things from you as well. Did he go into your son's room at all, or did he leave him alone completely?
As far as I'm aware, he left him alone completely.
Okay. What else went on for 5 hours? I mean, I don't want to get into details, and I don't think anyone else wants to get into details with this, but what else went on? You talked about having the zip ties removed from you, raped twice. There was a third rape involved, correct?
Yep. So,
okay.
When he was by the side of my bed, he started going through my nightstand, and that's when he found the clip to the gun that my ex-husband left there. And he left 2 clips in the nightstand. And when Zane found them, he said, where are the guns? Where are the guns? And he got instantly mad. And he was searching all over under my pillows, under my mattress for the guns. And, this whole time I'm sweating from places I didn't even know could produce sweat, like my toes, my ankles, everywhere in my body was sweating. I was dripping wet. So, he was so angry that I finally told him that the guns were in the closet. I told him where they were. He found them. He made me face my face down on the bed and not look at him while he was taking the guns out of my closet. So at this point, he had 3 guns with ammo. And I heard him doing something with the guns. And I was certain that he was loading them and racking them. And he said, there's lots of things he said, but one of the things he said was, so if I kill you with these guns, they'll think it was your ex-husband. And I became completely hysterical. I cried. I silently screamed. I told him, no, my ex-husband's in Pennsylvania. They won't think that it's him. He's not even in the state.
Which is really smart on your part to say. Mm-hmm. I remember you saying that in your last interview. Yeah. Do you think do you think he came there to kill you, or was it just more of wanting to be with you?
Knowing who he is, he's just never sexually satisfied. So I think he came to get, I think he came to rape me. I'm sure that he did. At one point he said, I've been waiting for years to be in this position. And that was when he was standing by the side of my bed. Another point, I told him to leave my son alone. I begged him to leave Wyatt alone. And he said, I'm a rapist, not a monster. So he admitted right there that he is a rapist. I don't know if I was the only one at the time that he had raped, but obviously it was me. But then, he asked me, what are you going to do when I leave? And I said, I'm going to go to the bathroom, and then I'm going to go lay down with my son. And he eventually let me go to the bathroom. And then when I came out of the bathroom, I looked at him and I said, "Can I go lay down?" And he had his flashlight pointing at me. And I didn't know this at the time, but he had taken a picture of me standing in my bathroom door that his ex-wife later found. So I went back to lay in the bed, and that's when he raped me for the third time, and it was violent that time. Details are in my book, but yeah, it was that was the worst. And I remember seeing a flash of light, and I didn't know if it was his flashlight. I didn't know what it was, but it turns out it was a video he was recording. So the police found that as evidence.
So at least there was, I mean, as awful as it was, there was evidence ultimately at the end, which we'll talk about, that once they knew and they connected the crimes,
yep,
he was done, and he was going to be going to prison. I want to talk about something that kind of completes the morning of November 18th, and that's how he escaped. And a really, really, I want to say a genius move on your part of not to affect your son, but also to make sure you both are safe. So how did he leave the house, and then talk to me about how you guys left?
Yeah, so he let me go lay down with my son, and he said, don't go out the window. And I said, it's the second floor, I'm not going to go out the window. And my son woke up, he heard his voice, he thought it was his dad. We heard the shower running, we heard the sink running. Wyatt asked me, why is the shower running? And I said, "Oh honey, somebody's in there fixing our shower." And then at one point he said that he really needed to go to the bathroom. And I said, "Wyatt, you can't go to the bathroom. There's, the bathroom might not work." So I dumped out his garbage can, and I told him that Santa really wanted Wyatt to listen to mommy, and Wyatt, he needed to go to the bathroom in his garbage can. So he did. He was 3 at the time, and he pulled down his little shorts and he peed in his garbage can because we couldn't go in the bathroom. And we just lay down on the bed, and we just watched Netflix because at that time we had gotten the iPad back from him, and he just kept coming to the door and threatening, "Don't leave, don't move, don't leave, don't go anywhere." And eventually I heard the garage door open. I heard the car door open, and then after that I didn't hear anything. He had set an alarm, and when the alarm went off, he would be out of the house. So the alarm went off, and I let it go off for a long time before I went and grabbed it. And then when I did, we still stayed in the room for quite a long time because I didn't know if he was, still out there waiting.
What time was this at, Danielle, you think? 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock?
6:15.
Okay.
When the sun was coming up. He just walked on my driveway.
Okay. And then he walked
just
on your drive
down the driveway.
Wow. Okay. So you waited a little while, and then what did you tell your son then at that point?
I was pretending that he was a worker man fixing our shower. And when he left, I just pretended like it was a normal Sunday. We went out in the kitchen. I stuck a steak knife in the sleeve of my robe. I made him breakfast. I searched the house. I saw carpet fresh all over my house. And so I was just I felt like I was putting on a show. "Oh, honey, we should go to the store and get yogurt. Mommy wants some yogurt," because I wanted to leave the house, but I didn't want him to know, we were leaving to go get help. So I was just putting on this show. He had cameras in the house watching me because I didn't know. Then eventually I was able to get my son in my car at the time. And then we went to the store, went shopping. And I had my phone back at that point, but I was afraid to use it because I didn't know if he was tracking me, if he bugged it. So when we got to the store, we threw anything that he wanted into this little shopping cart that he had. And we eventually ran into a lady, and I asked her if I could use her phone. And she let me, and she was talking to Wyatt while I called my mom. And I said, Mom, get your gun, get Dad, put him in the car, meet me at Mike's grocery store in St. Charles. And she said, honey, no, I can't do that. And I'm like, Mom, please, just get your gun, meet me in St. Charles. So she did. She didn't bring her gun, but she loaded up my dad and met me at Mike's grocery store in St. Charles. And she was the one that called the police. He had instilled 5 hours of me not calling the police and convincing me that he would murder my son and murder me if we told anyone. So I didn't want to call the police. But when I started to tell my mom what happened, she immediately called.
I really feel, Danielle, this is almost a blueprint for someone that could be in the same situation as you. That, I mean, even if this rapist would have been a murderer, you set yourself up and your son up, I think, the best possible way to save both your lives, which is, was this something that went through your head prior, or was this just something that was instinctive to almost set this up? Because I really do think this is almost a perfect blueprint of how to get yourself out of a situation like that.
Yeah, I mean, you watch shows and they're like, make things up, like, oh, my husband's out of town, like my fingerprints were on those guns. And that's what I said. And obviously they weren't, because I didn't use them. I think everything that I did that night was for my son. Everything was because I had a 3-year-old in the room next door sleeping while I was being raped by some unknown guy that was 6'3" with a gun. And looking back, like, I'm so glad that there was so much evidence, because if there was no if there was no video, if there was no pictures, if there was no footprints in the snow, like, would I be believed? And I think that's what a lot of women struggle with. Are they going to be believed?
And we'll get on that in a second. I want to take just a small, brief break here with Danielle. She is joining us. She's a sexual assault victim. We're talking about advocacy and kind of the story behind it and her new book. What's your new book coming out?
It's called 4 Pounds of Pressure. 4
Pounds of Pressure, right?
Yeah.
And there's going to be a subtitle with that at some point too, yeah. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
4 Pounds of Pressure is the trigger pull of a 9mm handgun. So I survived the lighter side of 4 Pounds of Pressure.
Yeah, I think that's, when I heard that title, I'm like, bam, I think that's perfect. Props to Alpha Roofing Company for being our sponsor for this. We're about 22 minutes in, and I feel like we're just getting in onto the story. So appreciate Danielle joining the Mavericks program. Let's continue this, okay? So what was the process like after? Kind of walk us through what it was like from when you called the police until Zane was arrested. Give us whatever you want in that, or whatever you're allowed to.
Yeah. A lot of this will be in my book, so please buy that. But I went to the emergency room, had a rape kit done. It took a while for them to get the results of that, but it did show male DNA in my rape kit, and then male DNA on the guns that were Cody's. So we didn't know who it was for 3.5 months. For 3.5 months, we had a suspect list. We were, they were talking to these suspects, collecting DNA. A lot of them had alibis, so they were able to rule out so many of the suspects. But what ended up happening is Zane, unfortunately, he hurt a vulnerable adult at a group home that he was working at. Supposedly, that's the charges he's facing. And the DNA from that rape kit matched the DNA from my rape kit. So Zane was a lead suspect in the case from Willmar, Minnesota. And so they went to his house and collected his DNA. And it just... Did
he fight back on it?
No, but that was part of the court process. Is we didn't obtain consent to use his DNA for my case, only for that case. So that was part of the reason for a plea deal, is because we didn't have consent to use his DNA for my case.
Wow. Mm-hmm. I don't know if we mentioned this or not, but how do you know Zane?
So he went to school with my ex-husband. They grew up together, or they went to high school together. My ex-husband worked with him. I was friends with his first wife. I had known his second wife. And Zane was actually in my wedding. So I had known him for about 10 years prior.
And what was he like as a person? Obviously, he's a monster now that we know. But what did you think before November 18th?
Yeah, and I'm hesitant to say everything that's on my mind because I don't want his kids to someday see this, and I want them to form their own opinions about their dad. And I know that they probably already know some things, but at the time I knew he was a narcissist. I knew he was too smart for his own good. And a lot of this was his friend's opinion as well. It was my ex-husband's opinion. It was everyone's opinion that you don't want to get on his bad side. And I think everybody knows that. We just didn't know what he was capable of.
So what were those 3.5 months like for you? Waiting. And I mean, sleepless nights, probably just awful dreams.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what was your day-to-day like for 3.5 months? And I think your day-to-day life now has probably even changed from what happened back in 2018. But during those 3.5 months, what was that? What was life like for you?
I'm not going to swear, but they were awful. I went between my aunt's house and my parents' house. I packed up our stuff in a laundry basket and garbage bag, and my son and I went back and forth between houses. We couldn't live in my house because my house was a crime scene, but I still had to pay my mortgage. I still had to pay my utilities. But a doctor that I work with, I have permission to use his name, so I'm going to. Dr. Thompson, he is amazing. He set me up with a safe house to live in. And so I stayed there. I think January 2nd, I moved in, and I stayed there until I was able to buy myself a new house with a confidential address. So now if you were to Google my name, where does Danielle live? You're not going to find me because it's a confidential address. So I was set up with security at my job, and they were absolutely phenomenal. They helped me feel safe at work. But when I was at home, I didn't sleep. I would drive different directions in case someone was following me. I didn't have the dog that I have now at the time. So I would wake up at 1:00 every morning and be awake till like 3. But, as a single mom, as a working mom, I worked over 40 hours a week. I didn't have time to rest. I didn't have time to stop and heal and, be depressed. I didn't have time for that. I had to put on a happy face at work. When I went back to work, I couldn't talk about what happened. Nobody knew except for Dr. Thompson, the department chair, my boss, my amazing boss. It was awful, but if I didn't have the support that I had, I'd be nowhere. I'd be nothing. But I had, yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I was going to change the subject because I'm curious. How were you surprised when you heard it was Zane 3.5 months after?
No, because I asked in January if anyone thought it was him. So I asked my ex-husband, I said, can you find out what his wife drives? Because we knew what kind of vehicle it was. The vehicle that he drove to my house was seen the night before the 18th. So November 16th was a Friday. It was seen in a field drive by a police officer. So he broke into my house the night before. And then the night of the 17th, the morning of the 18th, that same vehicle was seen in a church parking lot on the east side of St. Charles by the pastor of the church. So I wanted Cody to find out what Zane's wife drove, and he didn't know, and he didn't want to find out. So if we probably would have known it was Zane, in January.
Wow. So there was some evidence stacked up, I think, already. And
Yeah.
then once he injured or whatever happened at the that living home, it connected obviously both of them. Okay.
Yep.
So we walked through. So this is 3.5 months after. Now fast forward to just last month,
Mm-hmm.
so this was a long process. I think a lot of people forget that. All right, you arrest someone, and it's done with, but it's not. So you had the arrest in February 2019 or January 2019, February, right?
February.
Okay. So that's still now 2 years you're waiting to figure out if this person, what they did to you, if they're going to go behind bars. So what was that 2 years like?
Yeah, sorry. He was arrested in March of 2019.
Okay.
So every court hearing, I feel oftentimes it was postponed, it was extended, it was delayed, and then COVID happened and more delays. Lots of things that I can talk about, lots of things I probably shouldn't talk about. But it's like, I compare it to, it's like having cancer and having this awful thing and going through chemotherapy or radiation, but not being able to talk about it. So like you're dying inside, you hurt, but you can't tell anyone, you can't talk about it. And that's how I felt for over 2 years. And I feel like that's why I feel so free right now, is because I can talk about it. I don't have to be quiet anymore. So it was a long process. And then November of 2020, he pled guilty. And then February of 2021, he was sentenced to 250 months in prison. So it's been a long, long process.
How did you cope during that time, that when you couldn't talk? Were you involved in groups? Did you talk to doctors, therapists? Were you reading? I mean, meditation. There are so many different things I think that you can try to do, but I mean, what did you do, and what would you recommend maybe to others? Because maybe it's a case-by-case situation, but what did you do, and what would you recommend to others?
So I did lots of things. The very first thing I did was buy a computer on Black Friday with my big sister, because she is my hero. And so I started writing, and I think that first day or that first 2 days, I had 11 pages in a Word document about just how I felt. So it started as a journal. And then it turned into a 270-page book. So writing has been the biggest therapy. I also did kickboxing at Farrell's gym, which I would highly recommend. I have a motorcycle. I have a Harley Dyna. That's my wind therapy. And I ride with my best friend, Jake. He's my ride or die. So we spent all summer riding motorcycle, and that was extremely therapeutic for me. Otherwise, I did see a therapist. I ran, I worked out, things like that. So
it sounds like, just like the brain has different areas, for you to cope and for you to try to move on from this, I think you have to hit on different parts of your brain to help it heal. And I think you've done a really good job with that. I think writing is huge. Mm-hmm. And you have a blog. Yes. that we're going to talk about as well. So the writing, being outside, mm-hmm. therapy. Is there anything that you would have done that prior, during that time, that you've learned about since, that you're like, oh, I should have did this, that may help others in that same situation?
I think the biggest thing that I did that has been the most helpful was go to support group. I went to a sexual assault survivor support group in Olmsted County, and I was hesitant to go. I didn't want to go. My family convinced me, and it was literally the best thing that I could have done, because networking with people that have gone through the same thing that you've gone through is absolutely amazing. It's a feeling that you can't get from talking to your sister or talking to your best friend, because they don't get it. And that's okay, but talking to people that get it is amazing. So they taught me a lot. They taught me what to expect with the court process, different ways to heal. And so that's something that I would recommend. And even for people that don't report, you can still go to your county and go to a support group, and they're going to validate you. They're going to tell you that they believe you, and they're going to offer you resources and ways to heal. And that's just something that I would really recommend.
What was it like for your victim impact statement? You writing it and then you reading it. I think that's one of the hardest things. I try to put myself in your shoes or other shoes, having to relive it through writing and then having to relive it with everyone else listening to it. But I think it's such an important thing for everyone to hear, but yet also other survivors to hear as well, that you can survive and you can still go on.
Yeah. So I started writing my victim impact statement right after I was raped. It was one of the first things that I started writing, and I didn't even know who I was writing it to. But then I worked on it for the last 2 years, and then COVID happened. But I emailed the Winona County Court and asked that despite COVID, if I could still read it in person, because I knew reading it in person was going to be so much more meaningful than reading it on Zoom. So Judge Leahy did grant that, and I was able to read it to him in person. The only person that was able to be in the courtroom with me was my mom, because she was vaccinated for COVID, and I was as well. So it was healing. I broke down once. I'm surprised I didn't break down more than that. But I was so thankful that I got to read it in person, because, he could feel my presence. There were so many police officers in that courtroom, and I knew that they were all on my side, and that felt amazing. So.
And looks like you have a little friend there.
I do.
Just perfect timing. It's funny how animals are so instinctive, but when you need them.
Yes.
When was the first time you saw Zane after everything happened, after the rapes? Was that during the victim impact statement?
No. One of the girls from support group suggested, she said that she had gone to court hearings, all the small court hearings, because that desensitized her to the courtroom. It got her familiar with her seeing her rapist. And so that's what I did. And I did it for that reason, but I also did it because I was in the dark for 5 hours, and I didn't want to be in the dark anymore. I wanted to know everything. I wanted to know everything that was happening with the case, and I wanted to be there in person to hear it.
That might be a good subtitle there. Something with, I don't want to be in the dark anymore. Just throwing that out there.
Should I write that down?
You might have to. That one's not bad. Something with I don't want to be in the dark anymore.
I like it.
I am going to do a quick sponsor update, and then we're going to talk about everything after, about what you're kind of working on. So again, Alpha Roofing Company, the main sponsor. They are in North Iowa. They have a presence all over Des Moines, Cedar Rapids, and including North Iowa and Mason City. So what they're going to be working on, I know, this summer, and along with a lot of the roofing companies and the construction companies, is the derecho that hit August 10th of 2020 that is probably going to go down as the worst natural disaster ever to hit Iowa. And we're actually talking about some big time severe weather in the deep south, I think, for Wednesday. So we're hoping that's not going to be a match. But props to my sponsors, specifically Alpha Roofing Company. All right, we have Danielle on the show here. We're about 37 minutes in. We had a pretty good presence. We've been fluctuating between 50 and about 85 people on Facebook Live. So anyone that's on right now, Facebook or YouTube, if you're willing to share this, please share this. We got a couple of comments as well. I'm curious to see what types of comments we have here. This one's from Monica. She says, I'm a survivor of domestic violence. Thank you for speaking out.
Hi, Monica.
Elda says, where can we purchase your book?
Yes, I'm going to self-publish on Amazon. So if you go to www.danielleleukam.com, and if you subscribe to my blog, I'm going to have updates as to when my book will be for sale. It's not for sale yet, but I'm hoping in the next few months it will be. So Amazon.
I'm going to your website right now, and I'm going to make us smaller and this bigger. So here is the website, and it looks like there's a lot of different things you can do here. If you want to email her, if you're a survivor and you want some information from Danielle, who's obviously a tremendous resource right now for anyone that's going through that. Contact information, subscribe. Let's see if I can. Oh, yep. All you have to do, I think I've already subscribed before. You can donate, and we're going to talk about another resource she has as well. But something that I've been reading and keeping up on, and these are fascinating, Danielle, are your blog entries. I've always been a big proponent here of blogs. I think blogs are fantastic for so many different reasons. They're self-healing, but they also educate others, which you're probably trying to do both here, aren't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you have anything from, I mean, some of these have been viewed. I mean, you got 686, 800. This one, the victim impact statement. If you're wondering, how many pages is this approximately, the victim impact statement?
It's about a 9-minute read. Okay.
So it's not bad at all. I know I read this. It's fantastic. Go to our website. We're not going to spend time reading it on here. I want you to be able to go here. There's all kinds of stuff here. And This lioness and her cub. I love that. Do you have a tattoo on your arm that has that, something with a lion?
I do, yes.
Okay, I thought so. I thought we. I love that. Last comment here, Jessica Johnson. She says, "I admire your courage. Thank you so much for speaking up. I will need to get your book." So again, I will 100% have you back on the podcast to promote whenever your book comes out. I mean, the way you're going, it's going to be out next week, and I'm going to have you back next week. You're just like firing on all cylinders. Okay. So let's get back to this double screen here. So I want to talk a little bit more about, let's get back, kind of what you're doing. So why did you decide to be kind of an advocate of all this? There's a lot of people that, and I don't blame these people, I don't at all, that kind of just want to stay in their home, in their own element, and they don't want to talk about it. Why are you deciding to be someone different and trying to be almost a role model and someone to look up to and being a leader in the community for this, to fight back?
So a couple different things. So for example, if you know a guy and he has a daughter and that daughter commits suicide and that guy spends the rest of his life, advocating for suicide prevention. And it's not something that, it's almost not something you're not consciously doing. It's just something that you do. It's what you have to do. It's your passion now. So I almost feel like it's a calling. It's not something that I have to think about. It's just what I'm doing. So I did come up with a why that I wrote down that I want to read here. So I wrote that we have been targeted, terrorized, and wronged too many times by means of sexual violence and harassment. Rape culture needs to end. People need to be made aware of the significant number of women that are survivors and educated on prevention, how to help a survivor, victim blaming, and all the other things. So here I am stepping up to advocate against sexual violence with my experiences and what I've learned. I'm taking back my power in my body, and I'm here to empower others to do the same. So
I think that's amazing. I love that. And you're involved in different things too, right? You're on, is it a panel with Governor Walz, or a board with Governor Walz for advocacy of rape and sexual assault? Tell me what that is. I'm probably saying it wrong.
Yeah, no, it's the Survivor Advisory Group to the Governor. So it's a group of about 12 sexual assault survivors from the entire state of Minnesota with different races, backgrounds, and basically they run different bills and things like that through us to get our opinion. And then we were able to actually, tell them what we wanted to change. So I took things from the Olmsted County Survivor Group and I brought them to the state, and I told them that I think some things need to change. And one of the things was, if you've been raped in Rochester and you're looking for a therapist, it's really hard to find a therapist. Like, they don't call you back. They're full. They're booked out for months. But thankfully now with COVID, you can find a therapist online. So it's been good in that way.
How did you get involved into the group? Was it like everything that I feel like I've done in my life, which is probably, it's different than everybody else. Like, I've pushed to get, I've done it myself. Is this something that you were asked, something to push, that you pushed to get, or is it kind of mutual that it just kind of worked?
Yeah, one of the hosts of the Survivor or the sexual assault support group, she sent me an application. So I applied and they accepted me. So
interesting.
Yeah.
I think you and I talked about this, but I kind of want to talk about some of the stats because they're crazy. So I think one of your blogs, you said, like, I forgot what it was, 996 out of 1,000. I forgot what it was, that women that are raped, they're never getting justice. Do you remember what that number is?
I do. In my victim impact statement, I said,
that's where I read it.
Yes. 994 out of every 1,000 rapists don't go to jail. And so I said, please don't let Zane be one of those 994. And, that brings me to something else I wanted to talk about is a lot of the things around sexual violence is women. So women get raped, women get sexually harassed, we need to prevent violence against women. But what about the accountability for men? What about the statistics on how many men are rapists? What is the statistic on how many men sexually assault people? It's not. It's so geared towards women that we forget about the one reason we get raped: the perpetrator, the abuser. And I think that we need to spend more time focusing on prevention and the perpetrator, holding them accountable, rather than the entire focus being on women.
How can we improve that? Does it start in schools? Does it start in employment? I mean, as a kid, and we're about the same age. I don't know if I ever remember going through anything that I remember talking about rape, sexual assault. You have what's good, what's bad as you grow up. You have your parents as influences, and my parents are fantastic influence on me. But I went to a decent school. I'm college educated, but I can't remember ever in school them specifically talking about that. Do we need to maybe start in school and really hit home at a young age for men and women and boys and girls?
Yeah, absolutely. So teach your children consent. Teach your child that if they feel uncomfortable with a member of the family or somebody that, at their church or whatever it may be, to tell mom and dad, love your children. A lot of people that grow up to be abusers are people that may have been abused as a child, or, the famous saying is hurt people hurt people. And I wrote a blog on this, so feel free to read it. But a lot of the people that hurt people have already been hurt themselves. So love your kids, teach them consent. And then as men, again, a lot of this is about women, so I'm going to focus on men right now.
Yeah.
Notice your friends, notice your family. If your friend does something that, seems sketchy, or they don't treat women, the way that they should, notice it, pay attention, call them out on it. All these women get raped, but all those men are rapists too. So we need to focus on stopping them too.
Yeah. What else are you working on? I feel like you have a bazillion projects that you're working on, and even things that you're trying to even get funded. So if Danielle today looks back from a year later and looks back and, hey, Danielle, remember when we did this podcast last year? Where would Danielle in 2022 be? Where are you looking to go with some of this stuff?
So in 2022, my book, 4 Pounds of Pressure, will be published. I'm already working on a second book. It's each chapter is a different survivor's story. And in those stories is how they healed and what they would say to other survivors. So potentially my second book would be published. I'm self-publishing, so I'm hiring an editor. So I've been raising funds for hiring an editor. Just one of her types of editing is like $2,800. So it's pretty expensive. And that's why I've been raising funds. So I'm working on 2 books right now. I know I'll be working on more after that. The story with Zane is, it's never ending. There's so many things. There's so many things I haven't even talked about here in the last 48 minutes. There's so many things that you guys don't know, that there could be a sequel. There could be a part 2. And maybe I'll write it with his ex-wife. Who knows? Because she is a victim herself. She has a whole story herself that I don't have permission to talk about. So maybe we'll collaborate. Maybe this is me asking her permission.
I think that's a great idea. I think you're doing a lot. So your job right now is nursing, or the mama of all the nurses. Can you see yourself one day just focusing on this? Is this, we always say this, like I always said, and a lot of my family says, whether or outreach is your calling. Is this kind of your calling too? Is, hey, I want to make a difference in the world. Here's my avenue.
Absolutely. So I'm going to be speaking at the Medical College of Wisconsin and Marquette University. And I'm going to be saying pretty much what I said here today, educating them. I do feel like I have such a passion for this that's not something you can replace. But in nursing, I can be replaced. I love my job. I love my family. I will always be at the job I am at now. But the passion that I have for advocacy can't be replaced. So absolutely, I can see myself doing this forever.
I got a comment, and folks that are on, got about 37 people on right now. If you have questions, now's the time, because again, we'll probably be wrapping this up in about 10 minutes or so, because we've been on for 50 minutes, although it seems like 5 minutes.
Okay.
Here's one that Jeffrey said: I was brought never to touch a woman in a hateful way. The best advice I gave my son: every date is a potential mate. Every physical relationship is memories that as men carry forever. I think he meant. So save ourselves for that eternal mate. Stay strong. So I think what he means is treat everyone with respect. Mm-hmm. That's something I think that's been instilled in me, and I'm pretty sure that's been instilled for you, Danielle, as well. From a young girl for you and a young boy for me. I can remember my parents opening the doors for women. My dad still does that. My dad can be the biggest pain in the butt, and I'll tell you that. But he treats women with respect, and I think my whole family is like that. So I think it's important to see men do that, but also I think for everyone to treat everyone with respect. That's a big thing. Christina, who is actually my videographer and works at my company, Nelson Media Company, she said, the world is going to be such a better place because of people like you, Danielle. Thank you for sharing your story and advocating for so many. And it's true. It takes a brave person to talk about what went through that night. And I'm going to ask you a strange question. And I don't know if it's strange or if it's straight up, but was November 18th the worst night of your life, or was it everything afterwards that made it worse? Because there's a lot that went on the day after, 3.5 months, everything that went on. Yeah. We know that November 18th was the worst day of your life, and I hope to God no one has to deal with that, and I hope to God you don't have another day like that. No one should. But is that day the worst, or is it everything that led up to March or whatever that finally that Zane was put away?
That's a good question. I would say the morning of November 18th was the worst day of my life. Shonda Rhimes says in an episode of Grey's Anatomy, there's something oddly freeing about experiencing the worst day of your life. And so after that, I started living more fuller days. I started striving for goals and dreams I never would have before. I wrote a book. I mean, I wanted to be a writer when I was 5 years old, and now I'm finally doing it. It only took 32 years and a story. So yeah, everything after that sucked. It was awful. I mean, my entire life turned upside down. My son's life turned completely upside down. He had to suddenly move and could never go back to his house. But, now that I'm doing what I'm doing, I feel like it's for the greater good. I feel like what happened to me is going to benefit other people because I'm going to educate. And, one of the things I haven't talked about yet is victim blaming. There was only one person out of the last 2 years that victim blamed me. And she said, how could you let this happen? How could you let him do that to you? And I don't know, have somebody point a gun at your head, threaten to murder your child, and then, see how you feel. So I just want to educate on not victim blaming and all the things that we've talked about today. So I think that what happened to me is so awful, but I think that I'm going to be able to do great things with it.
Are you satisfied with the sentence that Zane was given?
No.
How do you cope with that?
So the first plea deal that we were offering Zane was life with the possibility of parole. So that would have been a guaranteed 23 years and then a possibility of getting out after that. If we had gone to trial, there's a potential that he could have gotten life without parole. I don't know that for sure. I'm actually going to be meeting with the prosecutors to discuss that more in depth. But I do trust law enforcement. The investigators on the case were absolutely amazing. The police officers, the prosecutors, I trust that they did what was right. I'm in the medical field. I don't know anything about court. So I put my trust in them. And truthfully, they were fighting for the state, not me. But I do trust that they did the right thing.
it's an amazing story on so many different levels. Jeffrey saying amen on, I'm just going through some of these comments before we jump off here. Amen on opening the door. And Monica, I think those are obviously not tears you want, but some of those tears I think that you're shedding probably are happy tears. I want to ask you how your son's doing.
He has an obsession with bad guys. He randomly asks about, hey mom, remember that one time that the man was fixing our shower, then we went to the grocery store and you were crying? And he randomly brings it up. And for a while he had a thing against worker men. Like, mommy, is that the worker man that hurt you? Because he saw the zip tie marks on my wrists. So he's okay. I do have him seeing a mental health counselor through his school because I want to be proactive. But that's been hard because I know how I feel. I know the therapy I can do, but he's, now he's 6 years old. I don't know if he knows how to express what he feels or if he remembers hearing the guy's voice. That's been really hard.
I think if there's any saving grace here, he was 3 at the time.
Yep.
He's probably always going to know what his mom went through. He's always going to be super protective of his mom.
Yeah.
But I hope there's not many memories of that as he gets older. But maybe you want that because that may set him up more for success in other avenues. I'm not sure. I'm always a firm believer. There's always a reason for this. Devil, evil, what have you. But at least you're taking a very negative thing and turning to a positive.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add, Danielle? We've talked about a lot of stuff and it's almost been an hour. I know you've gotten a lot of the whole sheet going here, right? And I'm like, Danielle, you know what? My interview style, I feel like I'm going to be able to hit pretty much everything. Yeah. But what else you want to add?
Subscribe to my blog. You'll get updates on how far my book is coming. I also have a Patreon website that's on
I have that somewhere here. Yep, there it is.
So this is going to help me continue to public speak and spread my message and teach people, about sexual violence and how to prevent it, about victim blaming, things like that. So
if you're ever going to do a cause, folks that are on here, 34 people on Facebook right now, and I'm assuming there's going to be thousands of people that are going to be looking at this. This is a great cause, and it's as much as $25 a month, or heck, five coffee things at Starbucks. This is nothing. $10 or $5. I think Danielle at this point, she'd be happy with anything. So this is, let's see, you got 2, I want by this time next week for at least 10 people, 10 patrons that are going to be on here that are going to be willing to give some money to Danielle, and make sure I'm not the one doing all of it here. There's going to be 2. And then by tonight, Danielle's gonna be like, oh, there's 10 more. And then I'm making up names and all that. What else are we promoting here? We promoted your book. We're promoting financial stuff because it is important. Anything that you do in life, anything that takes effort, and it's going to cost money. So please help out there and read those blogs. How many blogs do you think are there? Like 25, 30? There's a lot.
There's
maybe more?
Upper 30s.
Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't read them all. I bet I've read at least half. Mm-hmm. They're good. And you're a good writer too. So if you wanted to be a writer, I think you can probably do plenty of things in your life, but nursing, writing, advocate, whatever you want to do. Yeah. Last thing, when you were on your vacation this past weekend, were there any negative thoughts writing the book, or were they all positive thoughts?
Boy, I had to reread that one chapter that goes into detail about how I was raped 3 times, and that was awful. I had to go into detail about me telling my son that, Santa wanted him to pee in the garbage can. That was the hardest part, but everything after that has been, I know it's going to be for a good cause. I know it's going to be rewarding. I know it's going to be somebody else's survival guide. So other than that one chapter, the rest has been really good.
And why did you think that was an important chapter to add?
People want to know what happened, right? And if you skip over it.
I think that's, I mean, it's unfortunate that you have to add that, but also I think it adds to the story and it kind of rounds out everything that went in. So I agree. If you take out that piece of the book, it's not a complete book.
Right.
You're kind of wondering from there. All right, Danielle, 1 hour exactly.
All right.
We did pretty good. Thanks for coming on the program. Obviously stay in touch and let us know how this book thing goes. I mean, when are you thinking that it's going to be out for everyone to read? When do I get to read it?
Well, that's a good question. What is it right now, March? Maybe May or June.
That quick.
I know. I hope so. Yeah.
Well, good. Well, thanks for coming on again. Take care. God bless.
Thank you. It's been an honor. I appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. Talk to you later. Bye, everyone.